Calling this patch a balance adjustment is almost an understatement. We just put steroids in so many characters. What's going on, guys? This is Arkaden, and today we are going to be talking about the 1126 balance adjustment preview notice. And I'm sure I'm not the only streamer putting this out there because this stuff is insane. Some of these buffs are buffs on characters that we probably didn't even need a buff on, but why would you complain when it looks that good? And some of them are just straight up potential OP. I can't wait to even explain these and start jumping through them with you. So let's just start from the top and we'll work our way down. Let's kick it off then with Sage Baal and Saison, a character who has been considered pretty underwhelming like since the original nerf back when ML Era and ML Baal were kind of like a big combo, and they kind of nerfed him in a pretty big way and then kind of just left him there for a while. So jumping into what he changed, like the changes for today on him, so good, so good. So you already got a combat readiness push whenever the skill was available for the S2 already, but let's go into the S1 now. The S1, they're adding when the target is asleep after the attack, it increases the caster's combat readiness by 20%. So now on your S2, whenever it's available, you're getting 20%. And then when it's not available because you maybe slept somebody, you can try and sleep them again with the S1, and it will actually continue to be combat readiness boosting your Sagebail and Saison pretty much the entire time. That's amazing. Like, that's a really nice little addition. We'll see how like OP or not that ends up being as time goes on. But I could definitely see Sagebail and Saison becoming much more potent and present in a lot of the control comps that currently exist. Just in general, a really good fix. You'll see on the S2, they even buffed the chance percentage to actually sleep from 80% up to 85%, so giving it even a higher chance to actually get that sleep, which is super nice because that's really what you need on that AoE sleep anyways. And then here was probably the biggest change is when we jump into Eye of Death, because before, all it was just an attack that you used. If you had lower health, you would do more damage on it, but it really didn't do a ton of damage before, and it would like heal you up to full if you killed. It was kind of lackluster across the board. Like, nobody really knew why that skill existed. So now let's just read through what they've changed it to. So it attacks with an evil eye, which was the same as before. When the enemy is defeated, silences all the remaining enemies for 1 turn. So you're getting a 1-turn silence AoE as long as you kill somebody with this, before recovering the caster to max health. So it still does the recovery on the character as well. Penetrates defense but cannot trigger a critical hit. So now it actually has defense pen on it, which is pretty nuts, and then still says damage dealt increased proportional to the caster's lost health. So the question here ends up being, is that going to be enough damage? Is that going to be enough damage? Is this going to basically be kind of another Crow type ability that you're actually going to be able to take advantage of that sort of silences and also has, like, with now defense penetration, is that going to do enough extra more damage to make it valuable, like actually super valuable, like a Blood Moon Haste or a Crow or ML Crow's S3? Will it have like a similar type value? Time will tell. We'll see on that one, but like, huge changes. All in all, this character looks like it's going to be a lot better than it was before. Next up, we have Little Queen Charlotte. All they're really doing to her is adding a lot more damage, which is kind of weird because whenever you saw her before, she was already kind of a niche pick to pick into a lot of dark units. And I mean, I've seen things that have hit as hard as just crushing through an FCC with her shield up and literally just totally destroying with the S3. So people were already sort of building this character pretty obscenely high in damage, but really what they're doing by increasing this damage is saying, like, do you want to build your LQC to be a little tankier? Go ahead. If you want to see some damage actually like inflict through, like even harder than before without having to have the same amount of stats, they're making that actually a reality now with Little Queen Charlotte. So I think really what they're doing with her is kind of making her, she's not going to have nearly as much gear, I guess is the best way to say it. She's not going to need as much gear. And so Now when we look at the Will of Lemaire, if you look here at the end, they also changed that as well. So that it doesn't just smash the enemy with a sword attack, recovering health proportional to the damage, penetrates defense by 50%, which was already there. But now, when the target is Dark Elemental Hero, which this was a part before that it would do more damage, that it would increase it, but now it's also going to inflict additional damage to all other enemies except for the target, proportional to the caster's attack. So it's actually kind of putting you in a spot now where it's like, you're going to want that extra attack just to be able to actually like spread damage. To me, it reminds me of like original Says, but in general, it's just generally more damage. I got hit up by Gun Kung Fu this morning, and he was telling me about his, and I thought it was actually super, super interesting because he has one that's kind of fast, kind of bulky, decent attack, but it's also on lifesteal. And I thought that was interesting because it'll be interesting to see with all of the AoE damage now. Are you going to see a lot of just extra health back from like a lifesteal set? Are we still going to be seeing a lot of Sigurd Scythe ones? Are we going to see more Durandal ones? I think a lot of this damage, and when they buff characters like this, it allows you to just gear them in several different new ways, which is actually a benefit to the player depending on what kind of gear you have lying around. So all in all, Little Queen Charlotte, she's getting damage buffs, and she's going to have AoE damage now that's also going to attack everybody else on the team on the S3. So this is the buff, jumping into Cerise, that actually looks the most busted of all. Like so good. So Cerise already had her place as sort of like being a combat readiness just nullifier, being able to stop that in its tracks, also having stuns that kind of already existed, and an S1 to sort of to combat readiness push herself. She was in an okay spot. She wasn't as used as we may have wanted, but not a bad spot at all in the game. Like actually had use in a lot of control comps and potentially cleave if you set it up well. But here's what's interesting. They added so much to her. So on the S1, thank you for your follow. So they added so many things. Like, let's take a look at the S1. The S1 now has triggers a dual attack from a random ally when Froststorm is on cooldown. So Froststorm is the S3. So typically with her, you're going to either use a stun right off the bat, or you're going to use the S3 right off the bat just to like rip it and be able to get rid of buffs. That's basically what that S3 is all about. So naturally, before you're going to use the S1 at all on her, you are going to have Froststorm down. It's a weird situation when you don't. So just keeping this in mind, triggers a dual attack now with a random ally when Froststorm is on cooldown. So you're still getting the same combat readiness, but you're also now getting a chance that one of your damage dealers might also attack every single time you S1. And she's already a fast unit, so this just means potentially cycling characters that are going to be a lot slower and have a lot more damage to bring along with. Unbelievable. Just so good. As well as if you're using something like Miss Confeel, you're going to be able to set it up where if the Confeel lands the defense break and then like you come in with, I don't know, you have Kayron on the team or somebody else that's just big damage that can just come in and dual attack afterwards, you're getting to dual attack onto a potential defense break. It's insane. It's like ML Raza's S2. It's so good. So good. The S2 now for her is going to have Explodes a Magical Sphere, Stunning for 1 turn, which already was there before, and then also still has the increasing of the caster's combat readiness by 50%. That's all still there. But also, hey, while you're stunning them, we're also going to make them unable to be buffed for 2 turns. Bro, that's insane. Like, the ways that this could potentially land are just like, I mean, what if you somehow are able to land this on a Rylot's in some crazy scenario? Or, I mean, anything that would potentially get buffed up afterwards and is now just basically stunted for 2 turns from being unable to buff. Like, this is the Cerise that we kind of expected out of a limited unit, and this is just insane. Like, they just did so much work on her. And then you take a look and you go down into Froststorm, and this is where it gets nuts. One of the things that made Cerise so hit or miss was how she was going to attack things like Basars, how she was going to be able to land and get rid of those immunities on those types of characters. Well, now it just doesn't matter at all, because what they've done is the only real change they made to the S3 is they just basically made it that all the attacks are using Advantageous Element. So it doesn't matter that you're a water unit. You can get Advantageous Element on anything. And so this S3 strip is going to become insanely efficient and insanely usable all the time. So this character got just tuned out of its mind. I imagine we're going to see a lot of Cerises used now, and I imagine just due to seeing this that I'd be surprised if Smilegate doesn't buff this and then go, we probably should also put up a banner. So don't quote me on that, but this is a kind of buff that kind of just like screams, I need this. Also, we'll talk about a Guiding Light buff that comes in a little bit, and that's her artifact. So this really feels like kind of a setup to some degree, but the character's really good. I hope they keep all of these changes, but if it ends up being too OP, I would definitely understand if things get changed from here. Next up on limited characters as well, Landy. They said they were going to make some changes, or at minimum that they were going to look at her, and they made some changes. Like, this character looks good. And man, do I wish I just had molas for days to gear this character out as well. But Landy, oh my gosh, S1, they're going to be adding, so you already had fires at the enemy and increases the caster's combat readiness by 15%. Effect is doubled when the enemy is buffed. So now that it's still the effect is doubled when the enemy is buffed, but combat readiness increase and amount of fighting spirit now is also doubled. So it's super insane. I mean, like, just adding that in is just so good. Also, they're actually just putting in there as a side note, damage dealt by the skill will just generally be increased. So your S1's going to do more damage. You're getting more fighting spirit. You're getting more combat readiness. Or, well, the combat readiness is the same, but you're getting more fighting spirit at the very least there, which is super nice. Looking into the passive, which was before that you basically had to go 5 times with Landy to get maximum attack out of that particular passive. To be able to do that now, it's actually going to be 3 times, so you don't have to go nearly as many times to get maximum damage. You're getting 20% on every single one instead of 10. So you're ultimately, even after your 3 turns happen, you're still actually going up 10% more damage right off the get-go, and you're getting it like in half the time, basically, which is amazing. I mean, this is going to make her do so much more damage so much quicker. Then, on the S3, fires at all enemies and grants all allies increased speed for 2 turns. So before it was just the caster. Now it's actually going to give your whole team 2-turn speed buff, which is amazing because now you're just speeding up everything, which is super good. And then before increasing their combat readiness by 15%, which already had existed. And then you've got when fighting spirit is full, consumes all fighting spirit to penetrate the target's defense by 50%. This skill cannot trigger a counterattack, which we already knew that before. Bro, that's so much damage. Like, we're literally now talking about, like, increasing speed, and then, oh, by the way, let's just penetrate the target's defense by 50%. That's insane. So you're doing naturally more damage. You're naturally going to have more fighting spirit. You're naturally going to be able to have more. I mean, like, you can build this character, like, I would assume more tanky now than you could before, which is going to actually help her be more survivable to make it to the 3-turn. Landy's going to be really good. I think she's going to be actually really good. You do end up changing the soul burn from a soul burn of 10 that increased damage to a soul burn of 20 that is going to grant an extra turn, which may or may not be as useful, but I mean, the reality is you're already getting more damage anyways. So changing up the soul burn, I'm not concerned by at all, because at the end of the day, you're already getting more damage out of the character. So all in all, Landy buffs look dude, the 2 limited characters look so good. They did such a good job. Maya is also going to have some changes kind of added into her kit as well. You'll notice on the S2 now, instead of it just having attack with a shield with a 100% chance to stun for a turn, and then the damage dealt increasing proportional to the caster's defense, it's actually going to as well decrease the combat readiness by 30% of the person that she hits. So she's actually controlling them even better too. So she already has stun. She already has usually provokes and stuff here. And so being able to control them a little further and actually have some CR decrease on them is actually pretty good. We'll take that all day. Also on the S3, we are increasing, it looks like, the provoke chance from 50% up to 75% to provoke all enemies for 1 turn, which was already the same as before, but 25% higher chance to provoke. So that's huge. Before 100% chance to decrease attack for 2 turns. So before, you were getting a 50% roll on provoke and a 50% chance on the decreased attack. And now it's saying, nope, 75% now for the provoke, 100% for the attack down. And also the attack down is 2 turns, not 1 turn. So huge across the board. The increased defense of all allies for 2 turns after the awakening is still there. So it's all still really good stuff. And then the other thing that you'll notice for her is that they actually took both of those abilities and moved the cooldown from 5 turns down to 4 turns. So you'll be able to have them more often and should be able to control your enemies a little bit better. Maya's definitely not like an OP character anyways, but these fixes are okay. So with the specialty change character, Dollmaker Pearl Horizon, you'll notice that there are some changes to regular Pearl Horizon, but again, if you're going to play this character, it's going to be on the specialty change version. It just has more abilities, more awakened stuff, more general stats. There'd be no reason not to. So let's just take a look at that one in general. You'll notice on the S2, they are adding an increased combat readiness of the caster, to the caster by 10% per sleep debuff inflicted. So if you were to attack all of the enemies and all of them got slept, you would, or I mean, if you got all of them, you're getting an extra 40% combat readiness push for yourself. Amazing. Basically giving you the ability to sort of start lapping around. Having that control is only going to be that much more helpful. It's all good stuff. And just being able to make Dollmaker Horizon have more turns is only going to keep that control in your hands. Also, you'll note in the S3 that they actually changed it. So now it like specifically says that it's the target's max health that is actually going to get hit there. Not necessarily, like, it was a little confusing before where it was hard to say, like, is it Dollmaker Pearl Horizons? Was it the targets? I wasn't sure. When I watched the video for Dollmaker Pearl Horizon, it seemed like it was always the targets, but then maybe they just had like a really, really tanky Dollmaker. I'm not sure. Basically now it's for sure it's the target. So knowing that, you don't have to build up as much health to be able to make sure that ticks a lot harder. You can actually just get that based on the target that you're hitting, which I love. I think that's super helpful. I also really love that they changed the soul burn from a 10-1 to a 20-1, but instead of it having do more damage, because the damage was never going to be that good on a control-y type character, you weren't going to build her damage anyhow, giving her something that ignores effect resist and makes those sleeps and stuns land more consistently better. That's just better. It's going to take more souls to burn, but in general should be actually better, I think, at the end of the day. You'll also notice the speed rune always gave you 50% before chance to have decreased speed for 2 turns when using the S2 ability, but now it's 80%. So you have even more chance, not only just to push your combat readiness with that hypnosis spell, but also to potentially have a higher chance of landing those speed downs, making the combat readiness push just as important as the essentially slowing down of their speed. It's going to feel like a drastic difference between when your next Pearl Horizons turn happens, which I think is going to be super, super helpful. All in all, Dollmaker Pearl Horizon looks like a pretty solid change. Gave her some stuff to give her even a little bit more control. I love it. It's good. So the next thing on the list of things to talk about is going to be the artifact balance adjustments, which, jumping right in on the limited artifact of Guiding Light, if it was already kind of important to be able to hide out some of your rangers for a couple extra turns later to make them really hard to kind of snipe and get rid of, this is only going to make it that much harder. In case, especially if your ranger in particular is actually kind of a little bit slower, it gives you the ability to have a start of the battle granting of stealth for 1 turn, and then the same amount of chance afterwards to also get a 2-turn afterwards. Like, it's insane. Like, so good. Has a lot of potential to just like keep a character hidden, and will cause dealing with rangers to become much more of an AoE problem. And so single target will just be really difficult to get rid of anybody with that new Guiding Light. So all in all, I don't know exactly who this is going to be best used on, because I think it's going to be best used on a character that is going to actually, you're going to want to just like save and just continue working through, whether that's like a specialized area, maybe a Cerise, maybe a Litica. I don't know. So many things out there. There's just so many different options that you might just take and try. I'd love to hear some of your guys' comments on what you think the best use for Guiding Light is, because this is just really cool, and I definitely see people absolutely using this. Bastion of Perlutia is also going to be a really big change here. You'll notice that they're actually adding a 1-turn immunity to that shield that you were already giving to the person with the highest attack on your team, which for a lot of us that don't necessarily farm A13 constantly and have a ton of extra immunity, it's going to be as good as wearing a 2-piece immunity set, but you don't have to, and you can get your maybe crit set or hit set, whatever you need on that character. That's going to be pretty valuable. I can definitely see that being used a lot. Especially if we start seeing Bastion of Perlutia's potentially more on some of the PvP knights for newer players, probably in particular, who just don't have the immunity, giving them the ability to sort of like survive out that extra turn. Bastion's good, man. That's a really good change in general. So I would definitely pick one up next time you see one in the shop. The changes to Dux Noctis are decent. I'll give them that they are actually making the attack ramp up a lot faster, as well as if you do the math, 12 times 2 is going to be 24% max health on that, whereas 4 times 8 is 32%. So you're actually getting naturally more attack percentage out of the Dux Noctis now, but still takes 8 times, still takes a while to ramp up. This is going to be a very still niche artifact and probably still won't be used quite as much as other things, but it's a buff. We take it. So the last thing we're going to talk about here today is going to be the 2 4-star artifacts, Andre's Crossbow and Silver Rain, relatively new within 2020 and haven't really seen a lot of use. So Smilegate saw that, decided to make it so that it's going to be 3 soul removal instead of 2 souls from Onde's Crossbow. That's huge in the sense that it's like when you were only taking 2 and you're going up to 3, you're getting an immediate 50% increase. That's pretty huge. All that said, it is still on a Ranger artifact. It might get used in like very specific scenarios, especially if we start getting to the point where people are going back to using like triple Togs books or anything like that. Like maybe you'll see more use out of it then. But I mean, otherwise, the removal of souls is just, it's helpful and it's useful, but it's not like something that you're going to exchange out on a Ranger compared to some of like the damage increasers or, I mean, just the like guiding light or something that gives you a little bit more survivability. It's going to be a hard sell to put Onde's Crossbow, I think, even after this buff. The other one is going to be Silver Rain. Silver Rain, they're going to change it. So instead of it being a random ally that gets a 2-turn attack buff, it's actually going to be the highest attacker. And I thought, all right, I could see that being useful, and I could definitely see this being interestingly useful if you were to build a team that was trying to psych out Selines. If you were purposefully trying to just go like, haha, I'm going to put an attack buff on this one, and I'm also going to put an attack buff on this other one who also had the highest attack. So it still has the highest attack, and you're still going to attack like said Arby or whatever, just to make that work better. Maybe you can find a use for it like in that sense, but really Silver Rain is a thief artifact. And so number one, thieves don't have a lot of non-attack skills at all across the board. But number two, they also tend to be some of the bigger damage dealers that you're going to have in your team. So why would you want to be putting attack buff on somebody? I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's value. I think it could have value in certain teams, but it's very niche. And I still think even with this change, it's still going to remain relatively niche across the board. But that's just my opinion. So yeah, that's a lot to take in. A lot of new good buffs coming out here on characters that we may have like sort of tossed to the side and may actually start finding a lot more relevance. I have to say for the last 2 balance patches, between like all these Ravi changes and they made so many good balanced changes for the last couple of patches that it almost feels like they're just revitalizing and reawakening characters in really amazing ways. I love what they did with Guiding Light, with Bastion of Perlutia, some artifact changes that are also super, super solid. All in all, I really I enjoy this a lot. I'm most excited probably for the LQC changes as well as both Cerise and Landy. All 3 of those are like the most exciting for me because that's what I have. But I'm sure if I was a Sage Baal and Saison owner, I would also be pretty pumped about that one as well. Lots to kind of go over, lots to look through for yourself. I don't know what you've got in your teams, but you should definitely start looking at some of these buffs in advance and go, okay, how can I start planning out my teams accordingly, and who do I want to start working on, because this doesn't come out until the end of November. So keep that in mind. Anyways, guys, if you love this content, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Love being able to hear from you guys, and I hope you guys are enjoying this stuff as well. We will see you guys in the next video. Peace, dudes.